What happens when love grows, but the legal planning doesn't? Or when a relationship ends and suddenly everything you thought was clear becomes complicated? Welcome to the Family and Beyond podcast. I'm your host, Bim Delalu, a lawyer, qualified mediator, and your guide through the beautiful, messy, complicated spaces where law and relationships intertwine. On each episode, we'll unpack the issues that shape families today, from partnership to parenting to separation, support, conflict to clarity, and everything in between. So whether you're navigating change, seeking insight, or simply curious about what the Lord touches on everyday life, you're in the right place. The first season is called the I Wish series, inspired by the words I hear so often in family law. I wish I knew, I wish I asked, I wish I signed, I wish someone told me sooner. These are lessons learned too late. And in this series, we are turning those insights into foresight. Let's start. Welcome to the Family and Beyond podcast, where we talk about law, family, and everything in between. The I Wish podcast series is our first series. My name is Bim Delalu. I'm a family lawyer, a qualified mediator, and a legal coach here in Alberta, Canada. Over the years, I've helped many families through the highs and lows of relationships and separations. And one phrase I hear all the time is, I wish I had, usually followed by a lesson learned too late. This series turns those hindsight moments into foresight, so you can make more informed choices before things go wrong. Today's episode is I Wish I Had an Agreement. Yes, we're talking about the different types of agreement in relationships, the cohabitation agreement, prenuptial agreement, and the postnuptial agreement. What they are, why they matter, the myths around them, and how they can protect you, your partner, and what you've built over the years. Let's start with the big question. Why have an agreement at all? Because life happens. And when it does, the last thing you want is chaos. In Canada, for example, about 40 to 50% of marriages end in divorce. That's 1 out of 2 people, 1 out of 2 couples. Yet only a small percentage of couples have any kind of agreement in place. And among married people, nearly 1 in 3 say they regret not having a prenuptial agreement. As a family lawyer, I often meet people when they're overwhelmed, when trust is broken, emotions are high, and finances are tangled. A clear agreement made during calm, happy times would have protected them from this chaos. It would have saved money and spared years of stress. Agreements aren't about expecting failure, unlike what most people think. I see them like insurance. You hope you never need it, but you're grateful to have it when life changes. They also allow you to decide what's fair. In Alberta, for example, the Family Property Act requires that the parties split their assets equally, so 50-50. And this would apply even for long-term unmarried partners. For many couples, that's not really what they intended. So planning ahead gives you clarity, control, and peace of mind. What are relationship agreements? There are 3 main types, as I mentioned earlier. There is the cohabitation agreement, which is simply for unmarried couples living together. This agreement outlines how finances, property, and debt will be handled during the relationship and if it ends. This is crucial in Alberta, where living together long enough can create rights and obligations similar to marriage. The second type of agreement is the prenuptial agreement. Most people are familiar with this kind of agreement. They call it the prenup. You got a prenup. But most people also think it's for rich people, that have a lot of assets to divide. I would say think of this agreement as the blueprint for what happens if the marriage ends. It typically covers how you will divide property and debt, whether one spouse will pay spousal support to the other or not. It protects specific assets like a business venture, inheritance, or pre-owned home. It's important to note at this junction, just see this as some legal coaching here, that Prenups cannot decide issues of child custody or child support. Those by law have to be determined at the time of separation based on what the court considers to be in the child's best interest. The last kind of agreement is what we call the post-nuptial agreement. I call it post-nuptial agreement. So from the word, it is signed after marriage. It's useful if circumstances change, like a new business venture, major investment being made during the marriage, or maybe, you have blended families. Maybe you didn't have a prenup, and a few years into the marriage, something changes, So I would say, again, think of this as updating the insurance on your marriage now that circumstances have evolved. In all cases, these agreements should be entered into voluntarily with full financial disclosure by both partners. And ideally, with each of you having independent legal advice. That's how you ensure that the agreement can be enforceable in court. Again, all three are simply tools to reduce conflict, remove surprises, and protect both partners now and down the line. I'll give you maybe 2 or 3 real-life stories here, okay, from practice. Let's talk about a second marriage. These days, second marriages are quite common, third marriages. So I'll talk about a second marriage situation here. In this situation, a woman entered into a second marriage with a house fully paid off. Her husband never contributed to that house. Yet when they separated, he wanted half of the increase in the home's value. He also wanted spousal support because she earned more than he did. So again, she just said to me, Bim, I wish I'd protected myself. I wish I had an agreement in place. Because without a prenup, securing that home as a pre-owned property, you have to show a few things, right? He could make a claim. He might not get the 50-50, but there was a claim to be made. Another example I'll give is one in relation to having a business you acquire down the line. So in this scenario, the husband started a business mid-marriage using joint savings and a government loan. The business failed. And because there was no postnuptial agreement separating personal and business finances, his wife became responsible for part of that debt. In fact, as I recall, a caveat was placed on their home. And all of this literally could have been avoided with a simple clause separating the business risk from the household asset at the time. Another story, let me see here. Let's talk about a cohabitation surprise, where a couple lived together for 4 years. They were never married. But when they separated, one partner assumed, I'll just keep what I have, you keep what's yours. That didn't quite happen because under the law here, they were treated like spouses and they had to divide some of this assets, including the equity in the condo. This came as a shock to one of them. So again, a cohabitation agreement would have clearly stated their intentions. Common concerns. Let me see here. Common concerns that people would raise essentially, or these are things that will hold couples back in terms of entering into agreement. Number 1, it is unromantic. I'll say not true. I think it's responsible to have an agreement. The way I say it, I'll say, I love you enough to plan for both of us. So we are fine no matter what life brings, period. The second issue that I see people raise is we don't have much, so we don't need an agreement. No. Most people have something worth protecting, whether it's a savings account, a home, a car, a business idea even. Or maybe it's just debt you want to separate. An agreement will protect the present and the future. Some people talk about the fact that if I bring up an agreement, that means I don't trust my partner. No. When this is handled well, it can actually build trust. I feel it forces open conversations about money, roles, expectations, and fairness. Topics many people avoid until it's too late. The last, concern I hear often is, I don't want to jinx it. Maybe we'll just figure it out later. Trust me, later is the worst time. When emotions run high and communication is low, that's not the time to talk about this. It's far better to make decisions together when things are calm, when things are happy, when things are stable. So that way you don't leave it to your expensive lawyers or to a judge who knows nothing about your family. On average, you're looking at about 25,000, 2 to 3 years for a divorce matter. So that's 2 to 3 years of your life dealing with chaos and stress and, finances and expensive lawyers. It can all be avoided. In Alberta, I'll just give you a snapshot here. In Alberta, if you live with someone for 3 years, or even if you have a child together, you may be considered adult interdependent partners, which means property division rules can apply just like you would in a marriage. If you want a different outcome, you need a valid written agreement, which is done voluntarily. It has to be clear and also with independent legal advice. I can assure you that the courts generally, respect this agreement. And if you're already separating, you can still negotiate a separation agreement to avoid litigation. Again, litigation, can be expensive. Agreements would reduce cost. What should you do? Unmarried and moving in, get a cohabitation agreement, protect your intentions and your property. If you're engaged, discuss a prenuptial agreement. Months, not days, please. Months before the wedding. If you're married, get a postnuptial agreement, especially if they're new assets, businesses, or you have blended family considerations. Above all, be proactive. A short conversation now can save years of conflict later. It's an act of love, care, and foresight. As we wrap up this episode of the I Wish series, I wish I had an agreement. My hope is simple, that you never have to say, I wish I had an agreement. So if this episode sparked even one honest conversation between you and your partner, yay, that's a win. So guys, thank you for listening. I'm Bim Delalu. Remember, planning for the worst doesn't diminish your love. It protects it. Until the next episode, have a good one. If there's one thing I hope you take away from today's episode, it's this. Agreements aren't about fear or mistrust or anticipating the end. They are about clarity, protection, and setting a foundation that lets both people move forward with confidence. When expectations are understood, love actually has more room to breathe. So, if this episode gave you a moment of clarity, please follow or share this episode with someone who needs it. It helps more families access the information they often say they wish they had earlier. So until the next time, if you want to reach me, go to FamilyandBeyond on Instagram or online on a different platform. But take care of yourself and take care of your relationship. And remember, family is complex, relationships can be complicated, but you don't have to navigate this alone. Until the next episode.